Want to open up your Bibles there, Ruth chapter 4. Now, we're at the end of the book of Ruth, as you can tell, the last chapter. And where it started with ruin, just complete and utter ruin, right? As Naomi and her husband and their two sons left their country because of a famine. The situation wasn't great, so they left. And would you believe it, they get to the new place and then the husband dies. And the boys married outside of God's chosen people, and they don't have any children, and then shortly after they too die. And so the story leaves us quite early on, within the first 5 or 6 verses, with 3 widows. Naomi decided to come back to God's people. She had no other option really. One of the daughters-in-law, Orpha, I don't quite know how you say that, she decides, look, she was convinced that the best chance she's got of survival is to go back to her country of origin, to her people and to their God. So she goes there. But Ruth, who the story is named after, she clung to Naomi. Not so much Naomi, I think, but to Naomi's God. She trusted that her God would provide for them, because really, logically, what she did didn't make any sense whatsoever. And would you believe it, as they go out to glean in the fields, she just happens to be in this good guy's field called Boaz, who happens to be one of Naomi's relatives, a guy who has lots of integrity and honor and who's very gracious to these widows. And last week, Ruth approached Boaz after Naomi told her to do this, and she essentially says to him, hey, I'm available for marriage. I'm out of this widow phase of mourning, and I'm keen. It's a bit of a weird thing, actually. Normally the bloke asks the woman, but she goes out and she puts herself there because of Naomi. And Boaz says, look, because this is done God's way, he says, look, there's someone who's closer than me as family. I think he should have the first option to do this. And he was going to go talk to this guy. And that's where we pick up the story today. Okay, so Ruth chapter 4, from verse 1, if you haven't been with us, hopefully that gives you a bit of context of where we're at as we finish off this series. So, Ruth chapter 4 from verse 1, it'll be on the screen if you don't have a Bible, follow along with us. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and he said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, then tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah, and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. Aminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. Let me pray for us. Lord, what a wonderful way to finish this book, with birth after birth after birth, life. It's just wonderful compared to how it started. No wonder we've called this series From Ruin to Redemption, from death to life. And it's a journey that all of us are on. And so we all need to listen carefully this morning. Would you speak to us, please, about not so much Ruth as such, but where this story was heading as we follow that genealogy at the end there, and also you, the God behind it all. So speak to us, we pray, and help us to be attentive hearers and to be obedient as we listen carefully. And we pray this all for our good, Lord, and for your glory ultimately. In Jesus' name, amen. Now we're going to get stuck into it straight away. I don't know if you've noticed this, but as we've gone through the series, we haven't had a lot of points come up on the screen because it's quite hard, because it's a kind of collective whole, the story. And so I've got some points this morning that I think are points of our passage, but also kind of as a collective of the book as a whole as we get to the climax of the story, okay? And so they're all about God. That's the thing. When you leave here, don't think too much about Boaz, don't think too much about Ruth or Naomi or anyone else. This book is ultimately about God. And so the first thing that I want us to see from this passage and from the book is that God leads us and God guides us. Now we believe God is in everything, right? Don't we? That's what we believe. He's in total control all the time. There is never a time when God has or will lose control of everything. And that's what we see in Ruth as well. When Naomi loses her husband and her 2 sons early on in the book, and she's left without any grandchildren, she doesn't blame the famine, she doesn't blame sickness, so she blames God. She says it was God's hand that's dealt bitterly with her. And Boaz, later on in the story, he sees Ruth, the one who forsakes her people and their gods, and she comes to Israel and with Naomi, and what does he say? He says that she's taking refuge under the wings of the God of Israel. He knows, Boaz knows, when God's people look after someone, it's essentially God doing it in his sovereignty to these people. And then again at the end, as we saw just then, as I read our passage, we see this town, all the town women praising God for providing Naomi with a grandson. You see, God is sovereign in all of history. He's sovereign in the present, even during this pandemic, and he will always be sovereign in the future. God is behind everything, if you like. The tricky thing about that is as comforting as it is to be able to say, well, anything and everything is God's will, is how does he lead us right now in a more specific way? In my day-to-day life, with the small and big decisions that I have to make, how does he lead me? Him being sovereign over everything, it seems a bit distant, right? How does he lead me now? And the answer is, he does it through his word in the context of a defined community with recognized elders. Should I say that again? How does he lead us? He leads us through his written word that we've got, that we just read, in the context of a defined community, which we've got right here to some extent now, and with recognized elders. You see, throughout Ruth, this book of Ruth, Boaz stands out as a trustworthy and caring man. He's a man of integrity and honor. But much of what we see of Boaz is not so much natural to him, maybe. He's simply following what is prescribed in God's word, in the law. That's what makes him so good. Now, at the start, when Ruth and many others are gleaning in Boaz's field, right? We might just read that simply. It's because he's being obedient to some laws in Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 24, where they allow for that to happen. They don't have to do that. No other nation did that. When Ruth showed Boaz last week, that she's available, Ben was trying to explain to us a bit of the raunchiness of the scene maybe, and how easily that could have gone south, right, depending on what Boaz did. Boaz acted again with integrity. He was a man that wanted to be pure before marriage, and so he deals with things the right way. He even says, hey, I'm going to go sort this out for you tomorrow. And in our passage we see he does it. He doesn't lie. He doesn't just lie to get rid of Ruth, who could be a bit of a hassle and maybe even costly to his business endeavors. No, he goes and he does what he said he'll do. His God is a God of truth, and he expects his people to always tell the truth. And the two main ideas, which we're going to look at a bit again today, is that we've heard about, the kinsman redeemer and the Levirate marriage. It's all prescribed in God's word. You see, even though we don't have quotation marks in some of these cases in this book, like maybe we can see in the New Testament passages, right, where direct commands and stuff are often quoted for us from the Old Testament, we can see that they are here. God is leading his people through his word. You see that so clearly in Boaz's life. But not just that. He's also doing it in the context of a community. You see, Boaz is a community man. Did you notice that? When Ruth rocks up in his field one day and he says to one of his workers, hey, who's that? It's Ruth. Oh, yeah. He already knew about her, what she'd done to Naomi. And, he was all over the latest goss in the community. He knew what was going on in his community. Not only that, when Ruth asked Boaz to redeem her, he says, hey, there's actually a guy closer in relation that should have a first go according to God's law. So he knows his people. And in our passage, we see this community well, as Boaz sees, he sees this redeemer at the gate. He goes and sits down at the gate, and he recognizes the guy. He knows the people, right? So he calls him over. They sit down. Then he calls some people from the town as well. And you know what's interesting? You don't think about this necessarily, but the people actually listen to Boaz. They respect him. He's a man of honor and integrity. He's got standing in his community. And so, even as people from his community are surrounding him as he redeems Ruth to be his wife, they are witnesses. Again, people of his community. Sorry, this is repetitive, but you get the point, right? At the end, when a son is finally born, they are surrounded by a community. They're the ones that shout out to Naomi, hey, a son has been born to you. They're right there. The people of God who listen to his word together help one another to live it out and to do life God's way. That's part of how he leads and guides us. And lastly, as part of God's leading, he provides recognized elders to his people. Did you see that? So once Boaz, sits the Redeemer down, he also gets 10 elders to join him. Right there at the start of our passage, he gets these 10 elders to sit down as they make this important decision and have this big discussion. And you know what? Boaz knows the elders. He gets 10 of them. He doesn't have to get someone else, hey, I don't really know the elders. Can you tell me their names? He knows his elders. He calls them. When the other witnesses get there and he calls his elders, no one goes, oh, no, those are not the right guys, Boaz. They actually recognize them. They say, yep, that's the elders of our people. And so the elders Boaz fetches are also recognized by the rest of the community. And Boaz talks about these elders as being the elders of his people in verse 4. You see, it's a group of people recognized, these men as their elders. So elders don't choose themselves. Now, as I've been going through all of this, you might think, gee, this is very simple and maybe even unnecessary. But it's important. God uses these simple means to work out his grand plans and purposes. He did it back then, and he's doing it now. In this case, God didn't simply provide a redeemer for Ruth and Naomi, even though that's wonderful, but he provided Israel's greatest king. Now, remember how the book of Judges ended, okay? We mentioned this right at the beginning. In those days, so this is the book just before Ruth, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And then the book of Ruth finishes literally with King David. God provided a king after his own heart, that's how he describes David, to his people. And Boaz played a huge part in it by simply letting God leading him and guiding him through his word in the context of a community and with recognized elders. It seems simple, doesn't it? But it's so important. So let God lead you and guide me like this. If you want to marry someone, for example, make sure firstly they fit the biblical criteria. Talk to your growth group maybe. Say, hey, look, I've got a bit of a thing for that chick over there. What do you think, Or however you want to word it. Talk to your growth group. Talk to people close to you who you respect, people with integrity. You might even want to talk to one of our elders and say, hey, what do you think about this? Let me just run this idea past you. Let's pray about this together. What does the Bible say about this? And if you do that, and everyone in that simple process, if everyone says, go for it, then that's God's will. He's leading you and guiding you. If everyone says no, then you'd be silly to keep going ahead and saying, hey, well, that's God's will for my life. So if you want to start a ministry, let God lead you in this way. If you want to start a growth group in the church or a Bible study, let God lead you in this way. If you want to care for a specific person, let God lead you in that way. Especially if you want to serve, do it that way. Especially if it's in a leadership capacity. You see, what some people do, and this is why I'm bringing this up, is they skip all of this. Oh, no. Hey, God leads us and guides us, yeah, but maybe not us. Maybe me. God leads and guides me. Okay, so I don't really have to listen to all of the stuff. God calls me to do this thing, okay, this and that, and so I have to do it. And by doing that and not following this God-given way of him leading us, by doing it, there's no way that anyone can question it. There's no way that anyone can oppose it. And even though they might be thinking they're doing God's will, it might not be from God at all. You see, many people have caused great harm and great damage under God's name, under this God called me to do this way of life. And anyone who knows their Bible, when you hear these stories, as you read it, you think, man, anyone that knows their Bible, even a little bit, with a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of logic, would have snubbed that out very quickly. But that doesn't happen because these people don't let God lead them in the way that he's intended. So, friends, let's humbly submit ourselves to God's way of leading us and hopefully cause the least amount of hurt to people, preferably none, so that we might not be obstacles to people coming to know our God and his love and his grace for them and his faithfulness and his justice. So that's the first bit, I think, that you see it quite clearly working out at the start of Ruth, but also throughout the rest of the book. The next one that we learn is this about God. God loves the widow, the poor, and the outsider. And you could go on with that list, but I had to stop, otherwise it wouldn't fit. Look, it's already taking up 2 lines, but we'll get to it in a minute. Another way to think about this, the widow, the poor, and the outsider, is to say the vulnerable of society. This includes, as we see in the Bible, the fatherless, orphans, the poor, outcast. These are people in society who don't have the power or the means to change their circumstances. They are people who cannot fight for themselves. They don't have a position to do that necessarily. These are people, who can't look after themselves in its most basic ways sometimes. And throughout the Bible, what we see is we see God looking after these kind of people. His heart goes out to them. He loves them. He protects them. He fights for them. He provides for them. He loves calling himself a father to the fatherless. It's just a constant theme that you see throughout the Bible, and you see it again in Ruth. And two of the main ideas, or the commands actually, that are in play in our passage were given by God in order that the vulnerable might be looked after. Now, I'm going to quickly run you through them, and I know we've touched on both of them a little bit, but I want to show you the heart of God in them and how this is meant to benefit vulnerable people. So the first one is the kinsman redeemer idea, right, that you find in Leviticus 25. This is the goel that Ben kept going on about last week, the goel. In this case, if someone, for example, ended up in a huge debt, right, that they can't pay, maybe what they've done is they've given someone their land. They said, well, look, I don't have the cash, but there's my property. Or in other cases, they may have even said, hey, look, here am I. Take me, I'll be a slave for you for 20 years or forever to try and repay this debt. And so what happens in this case is their closest relative had the right and also the obligation to go and redeem them, to go and pay the price to get them back, the ransom, to whether it be the property or even the person. They would redeem either or both, paying the required amount, what we call the ransom. Now, this was in some way to ensure that property stayed within families. Okay, so that the rich don't just keep buying property and become richer and richer, and maybe those who are not so fortunate just become poor and even poorer. This was also to ensure people like Naomi, who out of no fault of their own, stayed in poverty and stayed in a vulnerable position in society. But it wasn't just for people like Naomi, kind of just by accident, if you like, found herself in this position. This was even for people who lived foolishly and made mistakes in their life and made a bit of a mess, you see. God wants to love people even if they've made a mess of their lives. In some way, and even if in some way you can say, man, you deserve that, God still wants to love them. So that's the first one, the kinsman redeemer idea. The second command, which you've heard about in our series already, is called the Levirate marriage, and it's explained in Deuteronomy 25, so if you want to go read up on that. But there we find that if a married man dies, then it's the right and the responsibility of a brother of his, an unmarried brother preferably, who then has to marry his wife and take care of his children. And if this brother who's just passed away don't have any kids, then the first child of this new marriage would be kind of seen as his son. And it would be counted as his. And so he would continue a family line. He would, in the end, inherit all the property and the money and whatnot. And so that is how it goes. Unmarried brothers were commanded to do this. But it could also be done by closer relatives if they wanted to. But it wasn't law, if you like. But they could do it if they wanted to. But you see what's happening. This command is to look after widows, so they're not just left by themselves with no one to look after them. This thing is being commanded so that children who have no father or maybe no future, if you like, can be looked after. God loves the widow, the poor, and the outsider. He has a heart for them. In both these commands, you can see God's heart for the vulnerable. And you know what? We can also see it in Boaz. He's a kinsman redeemer to Naomi. Once again, you see how he's following the Bible. He's a kinsman redeemer to Naomi, and through that we see in verse 15 her life is restored. She's got a new, refreshed nourishment, if you like, to her life. That's how it puts it in verse 15. And then Boaz takes on a Levirate marriage with Ruth, something that he didn't have to do, but that he wanted to do. who now becomes part of God's covenant people. She never was part of God's covenant people, and she's given her proper place. I think this is one of the most beautiful things about Boaz, of some of the ramifications of what he did. You know, as we started Ruth, she just gives herself over to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And you remember what Naomi did? She didn't do anything. She didn't say thank you or anything. She just turned around and said, all right, off we go to Bethlehem. Whereas at the end, it's almost like Ruth is finally acknowledged and restored. She's acknowledged as loving Naomi, as we've seen, but Naomi never seemed to acknowledge it. We see it again in verse 15. Ruth is even said to be more valuable to Naomi than 7 sons. Wow. Now that's a compliment of the highest standard back in those days, right? 7 sons. And so all of this is purely because Boaz does so much good, and he has the heart for the widow, the poor, and the outsider. He has the heart of God in a sense. Now, one of the questions that I had as I was looking at this is, why do I struggle so much with this? To Boaz, it just seems to come so naturally. He doesn't even have God's Spirit living in him like I do. Why is this such a struggle? Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's you as well. And I think the reality is because it's costly. It really is. It's costly. We see this with the Redeemer that Boaz first approached. I don't know if you noticed this. Boaz suggests at first, right? So he gets this Redeemer, he gets him to sit down, and he puts this proposition before him, if you like, and he's fully on board, right? He's fully on board. I think it's in verse 4, he says, I'll redeem it. He suggests that as the closest family member that he buys the land from Naomi. And in doing it, he'll gain some land for himself, but also he'll gain probably some honor because he'll be looking after Naomi. She's got a block of land that she can't use because of her standing in the community, but he's now, if you like, liquidating it. He's giving her cash that she can look after herself. And you know what? He didn't really have to do it. He could have been a bit of a bad Jew, if you like, and said no. Because you know what? When Naomi dies, he will inherit it anyway, because he's the closest relative. But he does the right thing. He does the right thing by God's law, and he says, I'll redeem it in verse 4. And then Boaz says, okay, that's good. But if you take the field, you're also taking Ruth. You're going to marry her, and your first son, God willing, will be seen as Mahlon's son. And so Ruth's previous husband, right? His legacy, if you like, and his life will continue on through this son. And look what the kinsman redeemer says all of a sudden in verse 6. He says, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. What's he saying? He's saying it's too costly. It's too costly for me to do this. He knows he would lose all the money that he paid for that field and more, right? Because he's taking Ruth on now. He's got to feed 2 people. Oh, and children, gee, they're very expensive. Go through clothes and shoes and schooling and everything. So he's going to lose all of that in a sense. The first son that would be born to him would end up inheriting this land that he's just bought. So he's never getting the money back. It's not going to be given to his own son, maybe, if there's a second or third son. And so in the end, he says, no, thank you. And he's not doing anything wrong, right? This part of what Boaz is asking him to do is not breaking the law, because Boaz is asking him to do something that's commanded only to unmarried brothers, not relatives. But Boaz, he's not just about the letter of the law, is he? He pays for the land. He says, okay, I'll take your place. He's actually got a heart for the widow, the poor, the outsider. He doesn't just look at those laws that God's given that we just looked at. He looks at what the intention was behind them. He pays for the land. He takes Ruth as his wife because he knows that is the heart of God. And he doesn't necessarily follow the letter of the law. He follows the spirit of the law. He sacrifices dearly for Ruth and for her descendants to be provided for. And you know what? What you see is he's more concerned about Ruth's inheritance and about Ruth's name than he is about his own. And here we are. Would you believe it? Think about this. Here we are, about 2,500 years later, and we're talking about him. We're talking about Boaz. Compare that with the other guy that decided to look after his own name and after his own inheritance. We don't even know his name. Did you notice that in the book? He's never named. It's almost the writer's way of saying, if you try and look after your own name, it's not going to work. If you're trying to build a name for yourself, God's not going to recognize that. 2 generations after they lived, when Ruth was probably written, no one even remembers his name. He's just Mr. So-and-so. You know, the nameless nearest redeemer that didn't end up doing maybe the right or best thing for Naomi, but only thought of himself. And now no one is thinking of him. Now, friends, Jesus said this. Listen to this from Mark 9:35. If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. Is that your motto in life? You know, to not make a name for yourself, but to serve and care for others and try and build them up. Is that your motto? I hope so. That's what Boaz did. That's what Jesus did. And I think that's what we should do. It's honorable in God's sight. If we try and build up an inheritance here, try and build up a name for ourselves here, we will not be remembered. I mean, I don't even know my great-grandparents' names. How many generations back can you tell people? If we try and do it, it's not going to work. We might be looked up to in our life for a while, as the top dog, but soon we will be forgotten. And more than that, God will not know or remember us. Our name will not be in his book of life. So ask yourself some of these questions. Do I show costly actions purely for the good of others around me in my life? Am I more concerned about my own fame than about the name of others? Am I building my own kingdom, my own reputation, my own inheritance, or am I secure in God's inheritance and I'm building up his kingdom and his family? Look how Paul puts it in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 15. This is what he says to the Corinthians. He says, I will most gladly spend, that's his stuff, and be spent, that's himself, for your souls. That's wonderful, eh? So imagine if we can say that to each other here. Let's make that our motto too. God will sort out the name and the fame and the inheritance. He'll look after it. Let's live by his Spirit to sacrifice for the good of others, especially the weak and the vulnerable and the powerless among us. So that's point 2. The last one is this. God is our Redeemer. That's what I want us to see from the book of Ruth. Have a look there at verse 14. The words the women say to Naomi at the end there could probably be the theme verse, right, of the whole book. It's certainly the focus of this point now. Look at what they say there. Blessed be the Lord, that's Yahweh, the one who's revealed himself, who has not left you this day without a Redeemer. You see, the reality is, if you've put your trust in Jesus, that is true of you too. And if you haven't believed in Jesus as your Redeemer, well, you can this very day. This very day, God has provided a Redeemer for you. And that's part of the beauty of Ruth and Boaz and God's love and his leading of them. Is in the end, Boaz, right, becomes Ruth's Redeemer. And through that, they have a son who becomes a near Redeemer to Naomi. Whoa, that goes a bit bigger. But wait, there's more. Through that, you've got Obed, who ends up being David's his grandfather, who then becomes the king of Israel, and in some sense, the redeemer of those people. And then, even more than that, as we look at the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew 1 and Luke 3, we see all these names in there. And in the end, this kind of ripple effect reaches even to Jesus, the Redeemer of the world. Now, many people might think, why do we need redeeming? Why do I even need a Redeemer? Right? So, we live in Perth. Man, ask anyone in the world right now, with all of COVID going on, where would you rather want to be? I'd probably say Perth, right? You know, we live in Perth, this amazing city in the land of the free. So we don't need a redeemer. But don't be too quick to miss the similarities. You see, we're all in a situation, just like Naomi, that we have no power to change whatsoever. Have you thought about that? It's almost like we're enslaved to it. We are controlled by two things, whether we admit it or not, and we cannot change it. Those two things are death and sin. And there's no way we can break free from their grip. You see, death hangs over all of us, and it'll one day take us. And how we live in this world is often shaped by death, this unchanging reality that we can't get away from. I mean, why do we all have super funds? Why do we have super funds? Why not work all the way to the end? Well, I think it's because we want to retire and get to enjoy life a bit in a way that's different, because death is coming, right? We're not going to live forever. Death is coming, and man, can I just squeeze out 15 or 20 years of not having to work and just going and doing whatever I want, not having to think about anyone but myself. That's why we have super, I reckon. And we have sayings like, you only live once, because we know death is coming. And there's just stuff we want to do to make the most of life before death arrives. But last time I checked, no human being has been able to escape the claws of death. You see, we're in a situation just like Naomi. We can't get out of it. And it's not just something at the end of our life, right? So if you had this thing, oh, well, at the end, but hey, in the middle here, nothing's controlling me. I've got everything under control. It's not just at the end that we're powerless, but we are powerless against sin during our lives as well, right from the day we were born. We all do things that don't please God. We all do things that hurt people. We all do things that creates division and destruction and breaks up relationships. And even when we see those things for what they really are, we can't seem to always just stop, right? You know, you can show alcoholics and gamblers, for example, exactly what they're doing and how what they're doing is hurting the people around them, and what they're doing is just going to utterly and completely ruin their lives and destroy them. And when you tell them, do they just stop? No, they don't. And I'm not saying we're all like them, but we're all like that in some way with various sins in our lives, unable to overcome and have victory over certain things. We seem powerless even against the sins that we hate. Even Paul says, the things that I don't want to do, I do. And you know what makes all of this worse? Is as we're sinning, we're incurring this debt before God. We rob him of his glory. We take things from him without repaying, not even saying thanks sometimes. We damage his property as we live on this planet. We damage his image as we break down people, as we destroy marriage. All the time, this debt is just going up and up and up, bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's no way out. Just like Naomi, that's our lot as humans. And we need someone like Boaz, someone who's not just able to redeem us, but willing, who doesn't just want to do whatever the law says, but just do what's best for us. Someone who loves the vulnerable, who has a heart for us. And you know where this is going, right? You know that who this someone is, this Redeemer. His name's Jesus. We need him. He is our Redeemer that the Lord has provided for us this day. You see, when Jesus died on the cross, and I think we even sung about it this morning, he paid for all of our debt before God. The infinite value and worth of the Son of God paid for all of it. His death was sufficient to pay the price, to pay the ransom. This is how it's put in Mark 10, verse 45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. You see, he's not like the nameless Redeemer who just wants people to serve him, build a name for himself. No, he's here to do something for others and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus' death deals with our debt. Praise God if we trust him. But what about death and sin? Well, we know Jesus rises victoriously. He defeats the power of death, and if we trust in him, dying will just be like falling asleep for us. We celebrated some of that last week at Stephen's funeral. It was beautiful. And as Jesus ascended and took his place of rule next to his Father, he sent us a helper to fight sin, the Holy Spirit who fills those who trust Jesus as their Redeemer. And all of a sudden, this is good. I'm starting to have some little wins over sin, and even do some good things. Not just doing the letter of the law, but going beyond that and living out the spirit of the law, living in line with God's heart for people. So how good is Jesus, our Redeemer? Maybe I should change that point. Not God, our Redeemer, Jesus, our Redeemer. How good is he? He's the only way out of this messy situation. You know what struck me this week as I was pondering about this last night, actually, is Jesus doesn't just take us out of a situation we can't get ourselves out of. He puts us in another situation that we can't get ourselves out of either. It's purely based on his life and his merit for us. You see, he takes us out of a situation and he puts us in a new situation, a new family. He gives us a new family name. We are Christians. We are Christ's. And we are also heirs with him of God's inheritance. Again, you see, Jesus is not like the nameless Redeemer who doesn't want to impair his inheritance. Did you know that every time someone becomes a Christian, Jesus' inheritance shrinks? Because it's another person he's got to share it with. But did you ever hear him whinge about it? No. Did it ever stop him from going to the cross? No. He happily lets us have a piece of it with him. And so we have a new future. We have a new security. No wonder they call it the good news of Jesus. And so there you have it, friends and church, the book of Ruth. From ruin to redemption. And you know what? We're somewhere in there along on the journey. And one day we'll be fully redeemed when Jesus returns. And in the meantime, let's let Jesus lead us and guide us the way he is set out for us. Let's love the vulnerable around us and continue to sacrifice costly and dearly for them, and to trust Jesus as our Redeemer in all situations. I reckon if we do this, we'll do great things for God, as Boaz did. We are instruments in the Redeemer's hands. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for what you have done for us as our Redeemer, paying the ransom that we owed, making us part of your family, sharing your inheritance with us, giving us your Spirit. And it goes on and on. You are just continually blessing us. Even today, in all sorts of things. In Ephesians, we see that you have blessed us with everything in the heavenly realms. Thank you for your kindness to us. As we sung earlier, we do not deserve it. Thank you for your grace and your love for us. Thank you for fighting for us, standing up for us, doing for us what we can't do for ourselves. And Lord, may that same attitude be ours. May this church be known as a church that lets you leads us, and guides us. And may we be known as a church who love the vulnerable in our community, and especially within our very own people. And Lord, may we be known as people who has Jesus as our Redeemer, who rest in that. Please be with us, and especially those around us who might not have accepted him as their Redeemer yet. Lord, would you lead them and guide them as you did with Ruth, and do great and good things to them through us and other Christians. And we pray this all in your name. Amen.